Daled Mishnah Aleph. Perek Daled is a short perek, only 2 Mishnayos, and Perek Daled deals with the halachas of Hatmona. Hatmona, we've mentioned at the end of the second perek, deals with the halachas of Bishul Drabonon, of insulating food. And Chazal, we mentioned, made a gezeira that you're not allowed to take off food from the flame on Shabbos, take off the pot off the flame on before Shabbos, and insulate it with something which is going to be moisif hevel, which actually adds heat. In other words, Erev Shabbos, a person would want to take his pot off the flame and put it on the side and use it for his Shabbos food. So Chazal say that so long as you do that before Shabbos, you can insulate it, you can wrap it in towels and other things which will maintain the heat, but not with some substance which will add heat. Chazal were worried that if you insulate it in ash or the like, you might come to be mechatze b'gecholim, to stoke the coals, which of course is an issa d'oraisa. And therefore, it's critical to note which substances are moisif hevel, and therefore you cannot insulate in these substances even from before Shabbos, and which materials maintain heat, just mekayim the heat, they just maintain the heat, they're not moisif hevel, and therefore it's in order to insulate foods with these materials. So the Mishnah says as follows: Bameh toimnin uvameh ein toimnin. With what materials, with which substances can you insulate hot food, and with which can you not? Ein toimnin loy ba gefes v'loy ba zevel. You're not allowed to insulate loy ba gefes. What is gefes? So the Bartanura says psoiles shel zeisim v'shumshamin. It's the leftover, the remnants, the residue of olives and of sesame. Says the Bartanura, k'shel konos yachat chamoid, when they're compressed and squashed together, they generate a lot of heat. So that is moisif hevel. So you can't be toim, you're not allowed to do hatmana loy ba gefes, not with this psoilis of zeisim and shumshamin, v'loy ba zevel, nor with manure, v'loy ba melach, not with salt, v'loy ba sid, nor with lime, v'loy ba chol, nor with sand. Bein lachin, bein yeveshim. Whether these materials, is going on all of them, whether these materials are dry or whether they're wet, you're not allowed to do hatmana with them. Next group of substances. Loy ba teven, you're not allowed to do hatmana with teven, which is straw. V'loy ba zogim, nor are you allowed to do it with zogim. Says the Bartanura, what is zogim? Klipe ha'anovim, they're grape skins. V'loy ba zogim, v'loy ba moichim. Moichim is wool. And the Bartanura says, Kol davar rach kori moichin. Anything which is soft is called moichin. Could go in semer, gefen, v'tzlishet semer, rach shal behema, v'gredas begodim, begodim beluyim. So worn materials, wool, this sort of thing. You're not allowed to do hatmana with that. V'loy ba'asovim, nor with grass. Bizman shehein lachim. When these materials, when they're wet, you're not allowed to do hatmana with them. Avol toimnin bohen kashem yeveshim. But you're allowed to do hatmana with these materials when they're dry. Fine. The Mefarshim explain, based on the Gemara in Shabbos Memtes Amud Aleph, that when it says lachim, it means lachim machmas atzmo, i.e., they're naturally moist. So, for example, the Bartanura says, "Bizman sheim lachin akula koya teven v'zogin v'oichin asovim." It's going on the whole list of the second group. V'lachin she'amru lachin machmas atzmo. They've got to be naturally moist. Loy lachin machmas mashkin, not because of liquid that was subsequently poured on them after they're dried. Shenoflu alein la'achar sheyovshu. So, in other words, if you take teven or asovim or grass and they've dried out, and then you add water to them, hasn't got the din of lachin, that's got the din of yovish. So what type of, when do they have this moisture? You find the wool, certainly, when they're moist, naturally moist, could go in betzemeh hasomach la'alyo. For example, the wool which is very close to the tail, or betzemeh shebein yereiches habehema, between the thighs of the animal, that wool is naturally moist, and when it's lachin, when it's still naturally moist, then you're not allowed to do hatmana with that. And this is indeed how the Rambam in Pirush Mishnayos learns pshat in the word lachin as well. The Mefarshim note that there seems to be a steer in the Rambam, because on one hand the Rambam explains our Mishnah like the Bartanura, that when it says that the second group you cannot do hatmana because they're moisif hevel, dafka when they're lachin and not yeveshim, lachin means lachin machmas atzmon, But yet the Rambam in Mishnah Torah, in Hilchos Shabbos, Perek Dalet Halacha Aleph, the same as our Mishnah, Perek Dalet Mishnah Aleph, says, Lachim va'afilu machmas atzmon. When they're wet, va'afilu, even if they're machmas atzmon. So it seems to be a contradiction to what he says in Pirush HaMishnayos, when it says Dafka machmas atzmon. So the Mefarshim note that, and the Art Scroll Mishnayos brings a footnote that from the Frankel Mishnayos, the Frankel Rambam, he notes that there's some manuscripts have been found where in the Yad HaChazaka the Rambam actually has a different nusach, which is consistent with his explanation on the Pirush HaMishnayos, which is consistent with the Bartan over here, i.e. when it says Lachin, it means Dafka Machmas Atzmo. Okay. Now the Mishnah carries on. Toimnin baksus, you're allowed to do hatzmona with ksus, which i.e. clothes, uva peiros, and with fruit. Bekanfeyono, with which means feathers. The Bartanura notes, with feathers, and the Tiferes Yisrael notes that it's lav dafka feathers of yono. It can be any bird, any type of feather. Ubenesayres shel charoshim, you're allowed to also do hatzmona with sawdust, carpenter's sawdust. Ubenesayres shel pishton daka, and with the sort of the shavings of flax once they've been spun, the flax itself, once you're allowed to do hatzmona with the leftover flax. Daka, so long as it's very fine. Rabbi Yehuda Oiseh, bedaka umatir begasa. Rabbi Yehuda asas the very fine one, but he is matir gasa, and when it's very thick. But when it comes to the nesoires, when it comes to the sawdust, Rabbi Yehuda is meida that it's mutter to do hatzmona whether it's thin or whether it's thick. He doesn't make a distinction. He only makes a distinction when it comes to ne'eres shel pishton. The halach is not like, however, Rabbi Yehuda. So the Mishnah therefore has three categories of what you can and cannot do hatzmona with. The first category are more serious. You can't do hatzmona with these items, gefes, zevel, etc., melach, whether they're wet or whether they're dry. The second category, you also cannot do hatzmona with them, but only when they're lachim. And the third one, we are allowed to do hatzmona, ksus, peiros, etc., etc. That is the end of the first Mishnah of Perek Dalet.